In this video, we're going to study Lesson 2 in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's English Grammar 1 course. We're going to start this lesson by reviewing the important ideas that we learned about in Lesson 1, and then by learning about language and grammar, and finally learning a definition of English grammar to learn what we're going to be studying in this course, English Grammar 1. Lesson 2 is titled Definitions in your online lesson because we're going to learn some very important definitions in this lesson. But first, as I said, let's take some time to review and remind ourselves what we learned about in Lesson 1. First of all, in Lesson 1, we learned that we may know about things. God created us to know things, and when we know something, we're conscious of it. We talked about being conscious of things, knowing things, having ideas in our minds when we're conscious of something. We also learned that some things that we're conscious of, we can perceive. We can perceive them. We can learn about them and know them using our 5 senses. And then we learned about the 5 senses: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. The 5 senses. The 5 senses allow us to learn about things by perceiving them. We perceive things that we know about by our senses. And remember that everything we perceive, we are conscious of. But some things we're conscious of, we cannot perceive. Okay? So we learned about what it means to be conscious. We learned what it means to perceive something. We learned about the 5 senses. And then we learned about objects. We said objects are any things that we can be conscious of. Anything that we can be conscious of, anything that we can know about is an object. Anything that God created, including God himself. All of these things are objects. Anything that we can be conscious of is an object. Then we learned about ideas. Our ideas are mental images that we have of objects that we have learned about. Any object that we're conscious of, we have an idea of that object. An idea is a mental image of an object. And then lastly, we learned about words. And we said, when we want to share ideas, either sharing our ideas with other people or learning about other people's ideas, we usually do so with words. We use words to share ideas. That's what we learned about in Lesson 1. If you forget any of those things or still need to study them a little more, go back to Lesson 1, watch the video over again, and study a little more. That's fine. And when you're ready, move on and continue in Lesson 2. Now, in Lesson 2, the first definition that we're going to learn about is the definition of language. Language. And here's the definition. Language is the expression of thought by means of words. Language is the expression of thought by means of words. You need to repeat that and memorize it. Language is the expression of thought by means of words. Language is the expression of thought by means of words. In our last lesson, we learned that the expression of thought is the same thing as sharing ideas. Expressing our thoughts is the same thing as sharing ideas. Language is the expression of thought by means of words. So when we want to share ideas, we use language. When others want to share ideas with us, they use language. Language allows us to share ideas. Next, we're going to learn that there are 2 different kinds of language. there are two different kinds of language. The first kind of language is spoken language. Spoken language. That's the first kind of language. And we learn about spoken language. Spoken language is the expression of ideas by the voice. Spoken language is the expression of ideas by the voice. Spoken language is the expression of ideas by the voice. Spoken language is the first kind of language. Next, we learn about a second kind of language. The second kind of language is written language. Written language. Up on the board here, you can see written language. Here on the video, you can hear spoken language. You can hear spoken language. You can see written language. Written language is the expression of ideas by written or printed characters. Written language is the expression of ideas by written or printed characters. Written characters are characters that we write by hand. Printed characters are characters that are printed by a machine, like a computer printer or a book printer in a publishing company. Written language is the expression of ideas by written characters or by printed characters. And by characters, we mean letters and symbols, like the letters of the alphabet, symbols that we use to write and share ideas with written language. Okay? Written and printed characters would also include numbers. So any letters, symbols, numbers that are written or printed are examples of written language. So two kinds of language. Spoken language, where we express ideas using our voice, and written language, where we express ideas with written characters or with printed characters. Okay? On the board here, you can see written characters. In my book here, you can see printed characters. These are printed characters. These are written characters. Okay? Written language is the expression of ideas by written or printed characters. All right, so far we've reviewed what we learned in lesson 1. We've learned that language is the expression of thought by means of words. Language is sharing ideas by means of words. We use words to share ideas, and that's called language. And we learned there are two kinds of language: spoken language and written language. All right? That should be pretty easy so far, but make sure you learn these definitions exactly as they're written in your lesson, because the words and the definitions are important. Make sure you study them and learn them. Now that we know what language is, we can learn what grammar is. As I said, this course is English Grammar 1. And so we want to understand, what is grammar? What is English grammar? Grammar is the study of the principles and usages of language. Grammar is the study of the principles and usages of language. Now that may sound a little bit confusing, because the words principles and usages are probably words that you don't know, but we'll explain it all, and it's very simple. Okay, grammar is the study of the principles and usages of language. What's important is that we can study grammar because grammar is something that we can learn. Grammar is an art. Anyone who wishes to learn grammar can learn grammar, because grammar is an art. and we learn grammar by studying it, okay? So you don't have to worry about, well, maybe I'm not good at grammar, or maybe this person's good at grammar, but I'm not. No, grammar is an art. You can learn grammar. You just need to study the art of grammar, and that's what we're going to do in this course. Grammar is the study of the principles and usages of language. So what are principles? Principles are things that we build with. Okay? That's an easy way to think about it. Principles are things that we start with and use to build things with. So, some examples of principles in language: the sounds that we use, syllables and letters. These are some of the principles of language. The letters, learning the names of the letters of the alphabet, learning the sounds of all the letters, learning how to clearly pronounce different syllables and sounds. Maybe you have a difficult time pronouncing some sounds. Many children do. Many children have a hard time pronouncing the sound of the letter S, S. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes children have a hard time making the sound R, R. They say W, like that. Sometimes they have a hard time making the sound of the letter L. Instead of saying L, L, they say Y. Okay, so learning these sounds of different letters and syllables is difficult, and we have to study it. And that's one of the principles of language. Okay? The sounds, the letters, words, learning words and what different words mean, learning how to spell words, learning how to read words. These are more principles of language. Learning how to make sentences. When we put words together to share an idea, the whole set of words that shares an idea is called a sentence. We have to learn how to make sentences, all different kinds of sentences. We're going to learn how to make declarative sentences, where we just share some fact, like, I am teaching grammar. That's a declarative sentence. We can learn an interrogative sentence, where we ask a question. Are you studying grammar? That's a different kind of sentence. We can learn about an imperative sentence, a command. You study grammar. That's an imperative sentence. So we're going to learn about different kinds of sentences and how sentences are made, because sentences are principles of language. We're going to learn about all different kinds of writings. In this course, you're going to practice writing and learn how to write. You're going to learn how to tell stories. You're going to learn how to describe things that you see. You're going to learn how to narrate a story and tell a story in a clear way. You may even learn poetry in this English grammar course, where you learn how to say things in special ways that are more beautiful. We call that poetry. All of these things, the letters, the sounds of the letters, writing the letters, words, spelling words, reading words, learning how to make sentences, learning about different kinds of writings, practicing different kinds of writings, and even writing poetry. All of these are the principles of language, things we have to study in grammar. Okay? So that's what principles are. The things that we build language with are the principles, the rules, all of the building blocks, the letters and the sounds and the words and the sentences. These are the principles of language. And then we have this word usages. Usages. This is important because, remember, the purpose of language is to share ideas. We want to share our ideas with other people, and we want to learn ideas from other people. Now, when we learn about the principles of language, there may be many different ways to say things, but there are certain ways that people say things every day, and these are important to learn. It's important for us to not just learn how we can say something, but how other people around us say certain things. So we can understand what they say, and we can also share our ideas in a way that they can understand. Learning how people use language, common ways that people say things, is the study of usage. We want to learn how people say things every day, how they use language, okay? So that when we share an idea, they can understand what we mean. All right, so that's what it means, principles and usages of language. Grammar is the study of the principles and usages of language. That's what grammar is. Now, every different language requires us to study the grammar of that language. In this course, we're studying English grammar. You may also study Latin grammar. You may also study Greek grammar. You can study French grammar and Spanish grammar and Italian grammar, Hebrew grammar, on and on. All of the different languages have their own grammar, and we need to study grammar to learn a language. In this course, we're going to study English grammar. We're studying English grammar. So grammar is the study of the principles and usages of a language. But in this course, we're only going to learn about one language, the English language. So in English grammar teaches how to speak and write the English language correctly. English grammar teaches us how to write and speak, or we should say speak and write, the English language correctly, the right way. English grammar teaches us how to speak and write the English language correctly. Okay? That's what we're going to study in English Grammar 1. We're going to learn how to speak and write the English language correctly. That's the goal of English Grammar 1. And that's going to be where our lesson ends. So just to review, we looked at all of the important ideas we learned about in lesson 1. If you don't remember what these ideas are, you should go back and study lesson 1 some more. We learned what language is. We learned that language is the expression of thought or sharing ideas by means of words. We learned that there are two kinds of language: spoken language, where we express ideas with a voice, and written language, where we express ideas with written characters or with printed characters, like in a book. We learned about spoken language and written language. Then we learned about grammar, and we said that grammar is the study of the principles and usages of language. We could just say grammar is the study of language. Okay, that would be fine. And then lastly, we learned that English grammar teaches us how to speak and write the English language correctly. And that's our study of lesson 2 in English grammar. So in these first 2 lessons, we simply learned about the study of grammar. Now, as we get into lesson 3, we're going to actually begin learning to speak and write the English language correctly. So I hope that's a helpful lesson. You can watch this video as many times as you'd like to learn everything that we talk about. You can go back and watch videos for lesson 1 and review all of that information. You can also study the lessons in your online lessons, where all of this is written out and printed for you, and you can study it there. So I hope that's a helpful introduction to the study of English grammar. If you have any questions or need anything explained more, please contact us. We're happy to help. God bless your studies.